All right, so we're deep diving into The House of Bernarda Alba by Federico García Lorca.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been reading this analysis you shared, and wow, this play's just bursting with drama and symbolism.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm thinking today we're going to, kind of unpack all those layers of meaning and see why this work still packs a punch, even today.
Right.
All those intense family dynamics, plus a little window into what rural Spain was like in the early 1900s.
It is fascinating how Lorca takes a family drama that on the surface seems simple enough,
Right.
but then he uses that to explore these themes that are really universal, like oppression and desire and the longing for freedom. You know, it's like he's holding up this mirror to society and saying, look, this is what's going on beneath the surface.
Right, yeah.
All those tensions and conflicts we try to ignore.
Okay, so before we even get into the house itself, we kind of need to set the stage, right? Like, what was going on historically when this play was written?
Absolutely. So the play was written in 1936, right before the Spanish Civil War broke out. And if you think about Spain at that time, it was like this period of just massive upheaval and change. Like old versus new, the role of the individual, and this fight for freedom that was brewing. And Lorca himself, he was deeply influenced by Andalusian culture.
Okay.
And he really used his art to expose all those tensions and to challenge the status quo.
Wow. Okay, so picture this. It's the 1930s. You're in Spain. Everything's changing. The old ways are bumping up against the new. And right smack in the middle of all that, you have the House of Bernarda Alba, this story that takes place in this tiny village where tradition is king.
Exactly. And at the heart of this whole story is Bernarda Alba.
Okay.
She's this really domineering matriarch. And so after her husband dies, she imposes an 8-year mourning period on her 5 daughters.
Oh, wow.
And this mourning period, you have to understand, this wasn't just like some personal choice, right? This was like seriously rooted in the social norms of the time, especially for women, especially in rural Spain.
Yeah.
And it really enforced this idea of keeping women secluded and limiting their roles in society.
Okay, wait, 8 years.
8 years.
8 years of mourning. I mean, you can practically feel the weight of that tradition, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just crushing these women. So you've got this incredibly oppressive atmosphere, these women confined to their home. So what happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, with all these pent-up emotions and desires, things don't exactly go smoothly. The play really becomes like this pressure cooker.
Right.
The daughters are isolated. Their lives are totally controlled by Bernarda, who rules with an iron fist.
Wow.
And so the house itself starts to become a symbol of their imprisonment.
Oh, I can almost feel those walls closing in. It's like the house is a character itself,
Exactly.
It's oppressive force just weighing down on them.
Absolutely. And Lorca uses symbolism masterfully throughout the entire play.
Yeah.
Take the color white, for instance. I mean, we usually think of purity, right?
Yeah.
But here it's almost sinister.
Okay.
It's like those white walls, those white mourning clothes.
Yeah.
It all creates this illusion of order, this like surface level virtue. But underneath, it's all a facade. Like putting a fresh coat of paint on something that's actually rotting away underneath.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Right.
It's like how we always try to present this perfect image to everyone.
Exactly.
But underneath, we've all got our own messy emotions and things we keep hidden, which makes me think of Adela, the youngest daughter, who dares to wear a green dress.
Ah, Adela. She's like this, like a force of nature, a symbol of rebellion against Bernarda's oppression.
Right, because this dress isn't just about fashion, is it?
No.
It represents everything Bernarda's trying to keep.
Exactly.
Down that youthfulness, that vibrancy. It's a rejection of this whole world of forced mourning. Can you imagine how powerful that must have been for an audience back in Lorca's time? And then, to make things even more complicated, Adela falls for Pepe el Romano.
Ah, Pepe el Romano.
Right.
The man who never actually appears on stage.
Yeah.
But his presence is everywhere, like looming over the entire story.
It's so true.
He's engaged to Angustias, the oldest daughter, but Adela secretly desires him. And that sets off this whole chain reaction of jealousy, rivalry, and it all leads to tragedy.
It's amazing how Lorca takes this guy we never even see and makes him this symbol of male dominance and just the sheer power of desire. Pepe becomes like this catalyst that makes all those bottled up emotions in the house just explode.
Exactly.
But wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Some people might say that the house isn't just about being imprisoned.
Right.
What about the idea that for these women, it's the only place they have any power or control control at all.
That's a really great point. The house is a very complex symbol. And while it does represent confinement and the oppression they face, it's also the only place where they can actually express themselves.
Okay.
Even if it's just through whispers or little acts of rebellion they have to keep secret.
Right.
Think about it. The world outside those walls, it's totally dominated by men and all these societal rules they have absolutely no say in. But within the house, they have at least some agency.
Okay.
It's a twisted kind of power, really, but it's all they've got.
That makes you think about how people find ways to have power, even in systems that are designed to keep them down.
Yeah.
But okay, so we've got all this symbolism, all this drama. There has to be some bigger idea behind it, right?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the big themes Lorca's exploring in the House of Bernarda Alba?
Well, one of the most obvious ones is oppression and control.
Right.
I mean, Bernarda, she's this authoritarian figure, and she uses her power to enforce these incredibly strict social and moral codes.
Okay.
And her daughters, they're essentially prisoners, not just physically stuck in the house, but also mentally and emotionally, they're trapped.
Right, and you can see how that connects back to what we were saying about Spain at the time.
Exactly.
This whole struggle for freedom against authoritarianism. So Lorca's taking this family drama and making it a commentary on something much bigger.
Exactly.
But there's also this element of resistance in the play, right?
Absolutely.
Like pushing back against that control.
That's where the theme of desire and repression comes in.
Okay.
The daughters, particularly Adela, are driven by these strong desires, like this longing for love and freedom. But that clashes with Bernarda's whole imposed morality and all these societal expectations placed upon them.
So it's this constant tension between tradition, which Bernarda and that mourning period represent, and this yearning for freedom and self-expression that you see, especially in Adela.
Exactly. And that's a tension that I think still resonates today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
We all have those moments where we're trying to figure out where we fit in, what society expects of us, and what we truly desire.
Yeah, it's that age-old question. Do I follow the rules or do I forge my own path?
Exactly.
Okay, but we can't talk about this play without addressing the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Gender roles and this whole patriarchal system.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole story revolves around these women trapped in this system that limits them at every turn.
It's a very powerful critique of those patriarchal structures that were so dominant then and honestly are still around today in many ways. And Lorca isn't afraid to show how that hurts everyone, not just women. It even creates this really warped sense of what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Pepe el Romano. Even though we never see him on stage, he embodies that toxic masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
That drives these women to such desperate measures.
Okay, but I get the house as a symbol of being trapped.
Yeah.
But is Lorca being a little too obvious here?
What do you mean?
Like, are we really supposed to believe these women are totally cut off from the world?
That's a really great question.
Yeah.
And while the house definitely is this powerful symbol of isolation, you have to remember it's not completely sealed off.
Okay.
Like there are cracks, little ways that the outside world still seeps in.
Okay.
Think about the gossip.
Yeah.
The rumors, even just glimpses they get beyond those walls.
Right.
I remember Poncia, the maid.
Oh, yeah, Poncia.
She's like a bridge between the house and the world outside.
Right.
She brings news and information from the village.
She's like the Greek chorus in a Greek tragedy, right?
Exactly.
She's commenting on everything, giving us a peek into that larger social context. And she even tries to warn Bernarda that she's going too far with her controlling behavior.
She does, and her presence really highlights another important theme, class, and the social hierarchy.
Okay.
So Poncia, as the servant, she occupies this lower rung on the social ladder, and her perspective shows us a different side to what's happening in the house.
It's incredible how Lorca weaves all these different threads together and creates this, this really rich tapestry of meaning.
Yes.
He's not just telling a story, he's making a statement about the world, about the forces that shape our lives and the choices we make in the face of them. But okay, how do we make sense of all this complexity?
Yeah.
Are there different ways to interpret this play?
Absolutely. One way to look at it is through what's called a Freudian lens.
Okay, a Freudian lens.
Developed by the psychologist Sigmund Freud. And this approach really focuses on how our unconscious desires and those repressed emotions shape our actions.
Okay, so if I put on my Freudian glasses and look at the House of Bernarda Alba, what am I going to see?
Well, you'll see that Bernarda's strict rules are actually a representation of what's called the superego. Yeah. That's the part of our psyche that tells us right from wrong, that imposes those moral standards, and tries to keep our more primal urges in check.
Right.
Think about how she's always talking about honor and reputation and keeping up appearances.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's internalized all these really restrictive social codes, and now she's forcing them onto her daughters.
So it's not just Bernarda being this controlling mom. It's like she represents something bigger, right? That societal force of repression, this voice inside us that says, you can't do that. You can't want that.
Exactly. And then you have the daughters, especially Adela, who embody the id.
Okay.
They're totally driven by their desires, that need for freedom and sexual expression. Yeah. And they're fighting against the constraints of the superego, rebelling against those rules.
It's like this epic battle happening within the walls of this house.
Exactly.
But what about someone who doesn't know anything about Freud and his theories?
Right.
Is there a simpler way to think about this whole superego thing?
Sure. Think of it as that little voice in your head that tells you what's right and wrong, what you should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
It's the voice of society, of your parents, of all the rules you've learned.
It's like that internal censor that sometimes stops us from doing what we want.
Exactly.
Even if it's totally harmless.
And in the House of Bernarda Alba, Bernarda is that censor. She's that oppressive force trying to micromanage every aspect of her daughter's lives.
Yeah.
But as we see in the play, trying to keep desires bottled up can have explosive consequences.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to pop back up.
Exactly.
But this Freudian lens is just one way of looking at it, right?
Absolutely. We can also explore the play from an existentialist perspective.
Okay, now we're really diving deep. So what is existentialism?
Well, existentialism, it's all about freedom, choice, and trying to find meaning in a world that can feel pretty meaningless.
Okay, I think I get that.
Yeah.
But how does that connect to these women who are stuck in this house full of rules?
Well, imagine you're Adela. You're stuck in this house, surrounded by all these suffocating traditions, all these rules about how women are supposed to act.
Right.
But, inside, you're burning for something more.
Yeah.
For love, for freedom, to really live your own life.
Yeah.
So from this existentialist point of view, when Adela rebels against Bernarda, it's like this incredibly powerful act of defiance.
Okay.
She's choosing to be true to herself, to embrace what she wants, even though it goes against everything she's been taught, even though it could have terrible consequences.
It's like she's saying, I'd rather die being myself than live a lie.
Exactly.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But, doesn't that make Bernarda an existential figure too, in a way?
How so?
I mean, she's making choices too, even if it's about holding on to a system that seems to be falling apart around her.
That's a really interesting observation. Bernarda's a fascinating character because she's both the oppressor and the oppressed at the same time. She clings to tradition, to those strict social codes, because it gives her a sense of order, a sense of control in a world that feels like it's spinning out of control.
Right. She's lost her husband, her daughters are rebelling, and Spain itself is like coming apart at the seams.
Oh, exactly.
So she's trapped too, just like her daughters, but by her own choices.
Yeah, it's like she's built this prison for herself and her daughters, all in the name of protecting what she believes is right.
It's really tragic.
It is.
And we can't forget Pepe El Romano, this unseen character who drives so much of the action. He's like this ghost, this symbol of everything these women are denied. Freedom, love, a chance to escape.
It's powerful how, even though he's never actually on stage, we still feel his presence so strongly.
Yeah, it's like he's this blank canvas, and each woman projects her own desires and frustrations onto him. For Angustias, he's security, social status. For Martirio, he's this object of envy and resentment. And then there's Adela. For her, he represents passion and a chance at a life outside those walls.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see how each sister responds to this shared desire for Pepe in her own unique way.
It really shows how different they are, how they're each dealing with this feeling of being trapped and the urge to rebel, but in their own ways.
Exactly. And don't forget Pancia, the maid.
Right, Pancia.
She's that voice of reason, the one who can see how dangerous Bernarda's suffocating grip is. She tries to warn her, but even she's limited by where she fits into society.
Yeah, she's such a great character. She's like both an observer and a participant in everything that happens. You can feel her torn between loyalty to Bernarda and concern for the daughters.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that even in oppressive systems, there are people who try to push back, to speak truth to power,
Yeah.
even if their voices get drowned out.
Yeah. And her presence really underscores that theme of class and how social hierarchy limits everyone's agency, not just the daughters.
Right. Pontia might be able to move around more freely than them, but she's still bound by her place in society.
Exactly. It's like Lorca is showing us how these systems of oppression, they work on multiple levels. You know, it's not just about gender, it's about power and control and how those forces shape everything.
It's a reminder that the House of Bernarda Alba isn't just some story about one family in Spain.
Right.
It's speaking to this universal human experience of longing, of feeling repressed, of fighting for freedom. It doesn't matter what your gender is, or what social class you belong to, or where you come from.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why this play still resonates with audiences today all around the world.
Okay, so we've talked about the historical backdrop, these themes of oppression, desire, freedom, and how all that plays out in the characters and their relationships. But there's even more to unpack here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what about Lorca's use of symbolism and how he uses language to create this world that's both beautiful and heartbreaking?
Well, we already talked about the house itself as this central symbol, this microcosm of the larger society, showing us how women are trapped and limited.
Yeah.
But there are other symbols sprinkled throughout the play that are a bit more subtle.
Okay, like what?
Think about the recurring image of the stallion, for example.
Oh, yeah, the stallion.
It represents this untamed passion, this raw freedom,
Right.
something that exists outside the world Bernarda's created.
It's like that wild spirit is always there, just outside the walls, threatening to break in and disrupt everything Bernarda's trying so hard to control.
Exactly. And it's not just the images that are powerful. Lorca's use of language is incredibly evocative.
Oh, absolutely.
There are moments of sheer poetry, of raw emotion that really stay with you.
Yeah, he creates this world that feels both incredibly real and also symbolic at the same time. Think about how he uses silence.
Yes. Those long pauses, those moments where things are left unsaid,
Yeah.
they speak volumes.
It's like you can feel the weight of everything they're not saying, you know?
Right.
All those desires and frustrations simmering beneath the surface.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And of course, Lorca wasn't just a playwright, he was also a poet, right?
He was, and you can definitely see that poetic sensibility in all of his plays.
Yeah.
The way he uses imagery, rhythm, metaphor. He takes language beyond everyday speech.
Right.
It's like he's composing a symphony of words.
I love that.
This tapestry of meaning that works on so many levels.
It's like those moments in a song where the music swells and
Yeah.
you feel this rush of emotion.
Yeah.
Lorca does that with language.
Exactly.
He makes you feel the weight of these women's lives, their hopes, their dreams, their despair.
It's not just a play, it's a journey into these really intense human emotions, into what it means to be alive, to crave freedom, to love, to lose, to fight against the darkness.
That's beautifully put. But it's not just language and symbolism, is it?
Yeah.
Lorca also uses these really clever dramatic techniques to build the tension and create this sense of impending doom.
Absolutely. Think about the structure of the play, the rising action, the climax, the tragic ending.
Right. It's like he's building this pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And you just know that something's got to give.
Exactly. And can you imagine watching this play live?
Oh, yeah.
The set design, the lighting, the actors' movements, it all adds to that feeling of oppression and confinement.
That's amazing.
It would. It's no wonder this play is still so popular in theaters around the world.
Yeah.
It's meant to be seen, to be experienced with all that visceral emotional intensity. It's an event, not just a story.
And it's an event that's had a real lasting impact on literature, on theater, on how we talk about these issues. Why do you think this play has stayed with people for so long?
I think it's because Lorca taps into something that's universal about being human. We all know what it feels like to be trapped, to want more, to fight against the expectations society throws at us. And in this play, we see those struggles play out on this huge scale with these really high stakes.
It's a reminder that the themes of this play aren't just limited to Spain almost 100 years ago.
Right.
They're timeless and they're relevant no matter where you live or what your life is like.
And it's a testament to Lorca's genius that he was able to capture those themes so perfectly in one play.
Absolutely.
And I think the fact that the play focuses on the experiences of women in a society dominated by men has made it even more relevant to how we talk about gender equality and social justice today.
It's definitely a play that still sparks a lot of debate.
Oh, yeah.
And makes you think about the power structures that shape our lives. It's not just a feminist play, is it?
No, it's much bigger than that. While the play criticizes patriarchy and how women are oppressed, it also explores these larger themes about human nature. Okay.
Our desires, our fears, what makes us capable of love, but also cruelty.
Right. It's about those complicated relationships we have with each other, the ways we're all connected and how our choices impact everyone around us.
Exactly. And I think that's another reason why the House of Bernarda Alba keeps speaking to people today.
Yeah.
It's about our shared humanity, the struggles we all face trying to figure out life, find our place in the world.
So it's both specific and universal, timeless and timely.
Yeah.
It's art that reaches across cultures and continues to challenge and inspire us, even after all these years.
Absolutely. And I think everyone should experience this play at least once.
Yeah.
Whether you read it, watch it, or see it performed live, the House of Bernarda Alba will take you on this incredible journey into human emotion, remind you of how powerful art can be when it illuminates the human condition.
Wow. That's well said.
Thanks.
But, we haven't even touched on all the different ways you could analyze this play.
Like, there's the feminist perspective, the Marxist perspective, the post-colonial perspective.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes this play so fascinating to study. It can be interpreted in so many different ways, depending on your own background, what you believe, and your own life experiences.
So it's a play that encourages you to look at it from different angles, to have conversations about it, and it keeps sparking new insights every time you come back to it. It's like a gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly. And that's why I think the House of Bernarda Alba will continue to be studied, performed, and debated for years to come.
I agree. I totally agree. Speaking of debate, there's this question I can't stop thinking about.
What's that?
Is Bernarda a villain, or is she a victim of the very system she's trying so hard to uphold?
That's the million-dollar question. And the really interesting thing is that Lorca leaves that open for us to decide.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. She's a tyrant, a cruel mother who stifles her daughter's dreams and drives them to despair. But she's also a product of the time she lives in, a woman trapped by the very traditions she's trying to preserve.
It's like she's both the jailer and the prisoner.
Exactly. And that ambiguity makes her such a compelling character.
Right.
You can understand why she does what she does, even if you don't agree with it.
And that's what makes Lorca such a brilliant playwright.
Right.
He doesn't give you simple answers. He doesn't tell you who to root for or who to hate. He gives you these characters who are complicated, puts them in these messy situations, and then asks you to wrestle with the moral questions.
Exactly. It's like he's holding up a mirror to human nature,
Yeah.
showing us all our imperfections and contradictions.
And by doing that, he's challenging us to really think about the world we live in, to question the systems and structures that shape our lives, and to fight for a better, more just society.
All said.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the House of Bernarda Alba.
It has been a fascinating discussion.
It really has. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought to ponder.
All right.
So, as you're going about your day, pay attention to how power plays out in your own life.
Yeah.
Who has the power? Who's marginalized? What are those unspoken rules that shape how you act?
And think about this. How can you use your own voice, your own choices, to challenge those structures and help create a world where everyone is free to be themselves?
Because at its core, that's the message of the House of Bernarda Alba.
Yeah, it's a call to action.
It's a reminder that even when we're facing oppression, we still have the power to choose, to resist, and to fight for a better future.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into the House of Bernarda Alba. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of Lorca's masterpiece.
It's amazing, right, how Lorca takes this story of a family dealing with grief and turns it into this exploration of so much more. Like every little thing, every line they speak, it reveals something deeper about the characters, about the whole society they live in.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls. You open one and there's another inside, and then another and another.
Exactly.
With each layer you peel away, you find something new and unexpected.
That's such a perfect way to describe it, and that's what makes this deep dive so much fun.
Right.
We're not just skimming the surface here. We're really going deep, exploring all those hidden symbols, all the psychology, the historical and cultural stuff that gives this play its power.
And, it's not just about understanding what's happening in the play itself.
Right.
It's about connecting it to our own lives.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about a time when you felt trapped by what society expected of you.
Yeah.
Like those unspoken rules that tell you how to act, what to believe, who you're supposed to be.
The House of Bernarda Alba really is like this mirror, reflecting our own experiences back at us.
Right.
Our own struggles, our own hopes for something better.
Yeah.
It reminds us that these themes aren't stuck in some village in Spain almost 100 years ago. They're happening everywhere, all the time, in different ways.
It makes you wonder, what would Lorca think about the world today?
Yeah, would he be surprised by how much has changed or by how much is still the same?
I think he'd be both, you know?
Yeah, I think so too.
He'd be excited by the progress we've made in some areas, but probably also really sad about how much oppression and violence still exists, especially against women and marginalized groups.
Definitely. And speaking of that, one thing that really stood out to me about this play was how relevant it feels to how we talk about toxic masculinity today.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though Pepe El Romano is never actually on stage.
Right.
His presence is so strong.
Yeah.
It hangs over these women's lives like a shadow.
It's true.
He's like this ideal of what a man is supposed to be,
Yeah.
but it's both attractive and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
He represents all the power and freedom these women don't have.
Right.
And the fact that they can't have him just makes them want him even more.
Makes it worse.
Exactly. He's almost like a symbol for the whole system of patriarchy.
Wow.
This invisible force controlling their lives, keeping them from making their own choices.
And it's not just the women who are hurt by this idea of what a real man should be.
No, you're right.
Think about Bernarda.
Yeah.
In a way, she's also a victim of it.
Absolutely.
She's swallowed all those strict rules about honor and reputation, and now she's passing them on to her daughters, keeping that cycle of oppression going.
It's so true. Bernarda is such a complex character. She's stuck between holding on to the old ways and facing the new reality.
Yeah.
She's torn between what she wants and what society demands of her.
She's both the one causing the harm and the one being harmed.
Exactly.
It makes you feel for her even when you don't agree with what she's doing.
Yeah, and that's the genius of Lorca.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't give you easy answers or tell you who's good and who's bad.
Right.
He shows us these flawed characters, these messy situations, and lets us figure out the morality for ourselves.
It's like he's saying, look, this is what humans are like, with all their contradictions.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his work so powerful and so thought-provoking.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the historical and cultural context of the House of Bernarda Alba.
Yeah, we did.
We dug into these incredibly complex characters and how they relate to each other.
Unpacked all that symbolism.
Absolutely.
And really examined those enduring themes of oppression, desire, and the fight for freedom.
And we've seen how Lorca masterfully brings all of that together to create a piece of art that's both timeless and speaks directly to the issues we face today.
Yeah.
It's a play that continues to challenge and inspire us, even almost a century after it was written.
But this is really just the beginning of your journey with the House of Bernarda Alba. We encourage you to go and experience the play for yourselves.
Read it. Watch film adaptation, or even better, see it performed live.
Let Lorca's words get under your skin, spark your imagination, and challenge how you see the world.
And as you go about your day, think back to what we've discussed here today. Question the power structures you see around you.
Yeah.
Embrace your own desires, and never give up the fight for a world where everyone is free to be themselves without fear.
Because that's the heart of what the House of Bernarda Alba is all about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.